Great to be with you, Bev. And yes, it's an extremely different issue for China, where it's almost the 180 degrees in some senses. Inflation, or at least consumer price inflation, is not a challenge for China. It's not facing a cost of living crisis in the same way. The crisis it is facing is kind of the reckoning with some of the challenges of the last few years, in particular, the recovery from the zero COVID era, which really kind of wreaked havoc with China's economy. Some of the other headwinds that China is facing are things that are more shared globally, particularly with the ongoing conflict in Ukraine, putting concerns about energy security squarely on the government's agenda and things like that. But you also mentioned the youth unemployment challenge, which has become really a structural issue for China. In June and July of this year, we're in the graduation season. China's going to have 11.6 million college graduates. And if you look kind of below the figures, a big percentage of the unemployed youth are university graduates for whom there simply aren't jobs. Already this year, more than half, or roughly half, of the graduates are saying they're not even going to try to find employment. They're going to continue to study. But that just kicks the problem down the road.
Yeah. And, you know, in terms of those young people, what China has done so well over the last 30 or so years is provide opportunity to provide people the support to get out of poverty through employment. If that stops, could that affect stability within China?
I'm not sure that this is going to be a stability issue, but it is certainly affecting the mood in the country. It certainly hasn't helped resumption in consumer confidence, which has really been a priority. And if you think about kind of why this is happening now and what are the factors contributing to it, you know, some, as I mentioned, are more global in nature, but some are quite specific to China. And a lot of the measures and kind of regulatory and policy reforms that we saw in 2021 related to shaping the economy that China wants for the future were sound policy decisions, but have created an environment where there are less jobs for the highly educated youth. And so 800 million people out of poverty, what China has achieved is nothing sort of miraculous in its own sense. And yet at the same time, the story that has been the story of China's rise for the last few decades is people having confidence that their lives will be better than their parents and that their children's lives will be better than theirs. And that confidence has been severely shaken as people are adjusting their expectations around incomes and also around job prospects.
Yeah. Is China's internal control resulting in a flight of wealth? We're seeing in Singapore droves of you know, high net worth Chinese moving to Singapore.
Yes, I think one of the ways in which China's growth story is changing is that it's not just about kind of growth at all costs anymore. The previous economics czar Liu He in 2021 literally said that the growth of at all costs mentality is over, and that we are instead focusing on kind of the orderly development of capital, focused on social fairness and national security. And it's this social fairness piece, common prosperity, that has some of the wealthy elites concerned. And you have seen kind of some assets being moved outside of China, and in particular, Singapore has stood to benefit. I believe Singapore's kind of requirements for setting up a family office in the city-state have become requiring a very high level of investment, and some of the elites are really making that move.
Yeah. China is also very keen to have the yuan as a currency of choice internationally. What prospect do they have of achieving that, do you think?
In the short to medium term, little to none, candidly. And that's simply because China, partially because of some of the capital that we're already seeing, or the assets we're already seeing more quietly being moved, is not willing to give up the capital controls and really kind of open its currency accounts. And the one way where there have been some chatter about China's use of the central bank digital currency, the Yuan. China's more advanced than many other economies in developing its Yuan. It has insisted that it's not about internationalizing the renminbi, but of course that could be one thing that down the line could be used to do. It's still at quite a modest stage, even if China is further along, for example, than the euro. So not anytime soon would be probably the most precise answer.
Yeah, but it is interesting with the BRICS nations getting ready to meet again. It seems as if they are looking at ways not to be so dependent on the US and the EU.
Yes, that's exactly right. And, the BRICS have even floated, I believe, the idea of creating their own currency. It's going to be extremely difficult to pull something like that off overnight, because while these countries might be united in their desire to kind of stand on their own 2 feet, set their own agenda, be taken seriously, stand up to particularly maybe the United States or kind of the Western dominated world order, that doesn't mean that they're united on very much else. They have very different political system, very different overarching goals, priorities, whether you're speaking diplomatically or economically, and quite a bit of tension amid them. Even the question over whether or not kind of Putin would attend the BRICS summit became quite fraught, in the planning up to it. So I think it's unlikely that we're going to see a kind of a consensus around the currency issue either.
Yeah, and interesting to see what happens to Mr. Putin in the next few weeks. Good to see you, and also your very energetic and athletic cat that made a very brief appearance. You did very well.
I was wondering how much it would be noticeable, but she has been, every time, I'm on TV, she likes to join us. So sorry about that. I have a virtual background.
She was fast and furious, and you did so well. Thanks, Mattie. Good to see you.
Great to be with you. Thank you.
Cheers.